Now you see, sorry, this recording was missing actually. Let me just open. Okay, just I'll give the recap here, guys. So we were talking about like test change priorities. Okay, so I just go ahead with this. So I've created a class wherein I want to execute the test cases based on the priority. Okay, based on the priority. For example, if I don't define the priority here, okay, I'll remove this priority. Yeah. Now you see DCAB. Okay, DCAB is there. When I execute this, see what is the output that I'm going to get it here is like I'm going to get it like sequential order. A will be executed first, A, B, C, D. Okay, now you can see what is that A, B, C, D. Okay, so let me take this one as like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now you see when I execute this, so it will be executed in 1, 2, 3, 4. That's nothing but A will be executed, B will be executed, C will be executed, and D will be executed. There will be like sequential order, it will be executing. So based on like ASCII values. Okay, this is the ASCII value, it is greater than like this comes first before A, before B, sorry. So this B comes before C. C comes before D. Okay, so what it does like first it will take the priority as like whichever test case have the value which is like smaller, so it will start executing from that. Okay, so my condition is like I want to set the priorities, like I want to execute few test cases based on the priority in the sense I'm going to just give the values. Okay, so values like priority is equals to 1. If I set this one as like priority is equal to 1, so this will be executed first. Okay, let me execute this test cases now. How this will be executed, you see. First execute it again. So what it is doing is like Sima. What it is doing is like A, B, C, and D. Okay. So this priority is considered only for this D. Okay. But the thing is like it is not considered for the rest of this case. Okay. For that, what we have to do is like we have to give the priority. Otherwise, what happens is like it will still take that priority as like first if we are not defining anything. Okay. So now we see I'm just setting this as like priority 1, 2, 3, 4. The order should be D, C, A, B. Okay. So I'll execute this. Have you seen DC AB? D C A B. Okay. So if I define the same priority, for example, if defining priority is equals to 1. So what happens is like it will execute this one because C comes before D. Okay, and we have the same priority. In this case, it will consider the ASCII value. Okay. So ASCII, what is ASCII value of C? Small c is like it should be, it must be like 98 or 99. Okay. 98 or 90. If you want to just take that one as like priority, just you can check the ASCII values also. How do we check the ASCII values? Because we have to convert this particular character into the integer. Okay. So now you see what is happening here. Let me execute it again. See what is the order it has executed? 3. Then after it has executed 4. Then after it has executed 1 and 2. Okay, it is taking the priority because its ASCII value is less than the value what we have for the ASCII value D. Okay, so this is all about like priority. Priority is like priority will help you to execute your test cases based on the priority, like which one we have to execute first. Okay, so or some test cases would be dependent here. So this is all about like priority. And now what we are trying to do is like we have some test cases. We want to group the test cases. Okay, so I want to only execute smoke test. For example, there is a build that you got. Okay, so today you have to test. There are like hundreds of test cases. In that hundreds of test cases, you don't test all of the test cases at one shot, right? So you want to just confirm the behavior of the application, whether it is like working as expected. So in that case, what we do is like we are going to group them as like a smoke test case, a smoke, regression, sanity, or group of test cases, whatever you want to group, you can group it. So in my scenario, what I'm trying to do is like I'm just considering few test cases are like smoke, few are like sanity, and few are like regression. Okay. For example, I'm going to add one more test case here. And here also I'm going to add one more test case. This is test 4, test 5, test 6. Okay. So if I execute this, if I execute this, what is executing here? See, it is showing up only regression test. Okay, so I don't see anything else, right? Let me execute it again. 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you see all the test cases got executed. Okay, so earlier there was something issue with that. So now you see all the test cases are executed: smoke test, sanity test, and regression test. But my condition is like I want to execute only this smoke test. Okay, so what I've done is like I've just created a group and I'm just marking these 2 test cases as smoke test cases. Okay, I want to execute only these 2 test cases now. Okay, I want to skip all the test cases. Okay, other test cases. I don't want to execute any sanity or regression. So for this, what we have to do is like we have to create a XML file. Okay, I've already created. So how do we create an XML file? This for this is like I've just gone to this, right click on this class, go to this, convert to test.ng XML, you'll get this. Okay, so just I've created this test.ng XML, but I need to now run the groups. Okay, so how do we run the groups now? So this will be like, we are trying to execute this particular class. Within that class, I want to execute only groups. Okay. So for that, what we have to do is like we have to use a command called run. So inside that, we have to use groups. Oh, sorry, we have to give it inside this test. Okay, so run group name is equals to smoke. Just to most clear parameter groups of packages. Okay. Group name I'm defining. Groups. Okay, so we can add like groups. And after that, I'm going to include the group name. Sorry. So we have a include name is equals to smoke. Okay. So we'll see what is that syntax and all when. Okay. So now I'm going to remove this one. So within the test, we have a run. Within that run, okay, we need to close here. Okay. Test. We need to add this run a little bit behind this. So which group you want to run, you have to give it here. Okay. So will go and check the syntax. Okay. There is nothing difficult in running the groups. I'll tell you how do we run it. So we open. I should have shown this documentation. I'll just go with the documentation. Okay. So what is that? There are a lot of things that we have to remember, guys, but better to follow the documentation. So if you have any questions, better to follow the documentation. So here you can go and see how do we create the groups. Okay. Parallel execution and yeah, test groups. So I've created the groups, right? So here it's like I've created the group. In our case, I've created the smoke and sanity and regression. Okay. So how do we run it? See, here we have groups. Inside that, we have to put the run tag. Inside that, we have to include the group. Which group you want to execute? Okay. So which group you want to execute, you have to define under this particular groups run tag. Okay. So this is nothing, but I'm just including this one. Okay. So let's go and try to execute now. So only what test cases that will be executed is like smoke test cases, okay, which are like grouped as like smoke. You can see here we have a smoke. Okay, so right click, run as test.ng XML. Okay, now you see that we have only 2 test cases executed. Okay, 2 test cases executed. If I execute from this class, what happens now? So we have configured everything in XML file, but we are running it from the test class. It will execute all the test cases. Okay. So now you see that we have this test case, like configured as like only group should be executed from that particular class, and test is like marked as like smoke, then that group should be executed. Okay. So other thing is like exclude. Now if I say exclude, it will exclude smoke and it will execute only that particular, like the other things which are marked as like sanity and regression will be executed. Okay, it will exclude this one and it will execute rest of the test cases. Okay, so if you want to include, let's see that if you can include the other group also. Include name. Now you see, go and execute this. So what is happening now? Smoke and regression got executed. But what about this sanity? We did not include, so that is the reason why it's excluded this sanity. Okay, so this is how we'll be running the groups. Okay, so now we have other set of tests here. So this is also the configurable. Okay, we can configure this like test 1 and test 2. Okay, so here I'm going to include sanity. Now you see, go and execute it. So it will happily execute in smoke in the first test, sanity in the second test. Okay, so here it's looking like, all the things are printed in console, but when you go to this test engine, you can see now test 1 has class. Within that class, it has executed test 1 and test 2. So test 2 is kind of like a group class, and inside that we have a class test 3 and test 4 executed. Okay, what is test 3 and test 4? Test 3 and test 4 are sanity, test 1 and test 2 are smoke, but they are executed in a different test. Okay, different test categorized in XML file. Okay, so like this also we can do this. Okay, so this is how we'll be executing the groups. Okay, now my condition is like I don't want to separately maintain this sanity and if I say that there are like duplicate test cases, I'm executing smoke test and sanity test, both the test cases are duplicated. Okay, I want to categorize like them as like smoke and sanity. Okay, smoke and sanity. I want to consider few test cases smoke and sanity. So I want to execute this test cases and this test cases. Okay, and here what I'm going to do is like I can mark them as like I want to treat them as like sanity test. Okay, so whenever there is a smoke or sanity, okay, smoke or sanity is given, these two test cases will be executed. Okay, it's kind of like smoke or sanity, but this is like sanity, only sanity. When you give the sanity, it will execute sanity test cases. When you give the regression, it will execute only regression. Okay, but here there is a catch. Okay, when you give the smoke, it will execute these test cases. Okay, so this test cases. When you give the sanity, these 4 test cases will be executed because this is our condition. Okay, whether you give smoke or sanity, it will execute these 2 conditions. Okay, so in case of like if you want to execute smoke test cases, if you give sanity, it will execute 4 test cases because it is kind of like it will include these groups are nothing but it is categorized smoke or sanity. But here it is only sanity. Okay, but here it is only sanity. But here if you see, if you give smoke, it will execute 2 test cases. If you give sanity, it will execute 4 test cases. Okay, let's look into that as an example. Okay, I'll just delete this one. Just I want to show how do we execute for different tests also. Now I'm going to execute smoke test cases. Okay, so how many test cases should be executed? Which are marked as like which are grouped as like smoke or sanity should be executed. Okay, here it will execute 2 test cases. Okay, now you see when I give sanity, it will take the R condition. R condition, smoke or sanity, sanity. All 4 test cases should be executed. See, what it is doing is like it will consider if you give sanity and this sanity is a group, is a part of this 2 test cases. Okay, so here you can see these are part of these 2 test cases along with the 2 test cases that we have here. So what it does is like it's going to execute those all 4 test cases at a time. Okay, so this is like group execution. Are you clear with this, guys? So here what we do is like just go and I'm going to give the sanity. I'll exclude name is equals to smoke. Now let's see that what happens. Okay, I'm excluding smoke, but I want to execute sanity. See what happens here. See, it's going to execute only sanity cases. Though our condition will not work in this case because we are excluding smoke test. Okay, so we are excluding smoke test. So this is how we can manage the groups. And if you want to define this, for example, I want to have smoke test, sanity test, and regression also. Okay. So here now we want to we can define them grouping of group. Okay. So meta groups, what we can say is like meta groups. For example, now you see in these groups I'm defining sanity, sanity and smoke test or regression test. Okay. But see, daily what we have to run is like, for example, we are getting a daily build. In that build, we want to run smoke test. Weekly, we want to execute smoke and sanity. Okay. So monthly, we want to execute some regression. All this sanity, smoke, and regression. So in this case, what we can do is like we can define the groups. Okay. So we can define the groups, and within that group, we can include and exclude the groups. Okay. So how do we do it is like, see. So within these groups, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to define a group. Okay. It's kind of like a group of groups. Okay. So for example, let me say here we have a, okay, still this one. So this is like a sanity. Okay, this is like a smoke test. Okay, after this sanity, after this regression. Okay, so my condition is like this should be executed daily, and this should be executed weekly, and this should be executed monthly. Okay, so I'll write it now. It's like daily I should execute this one, and this one is like weekly I need to execute, and this one is like monthly I need to execute. Okay, so this is so smoke, and this is sanity, and this is regressions. Okay, so we have 2 test cases here, we have 4 test cases here, and we have 8 test cases here. Okay, for example. So my condition is like I want to I want to define weekly, daily, this group should be executed, smoke test and sanity is like weekly should be executed, and regression is like it should be executed monthly. So in that case, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to define a group called so daily. Okay, so daily. So in this what I can give is like I can include, okay, which test case I want to execute. So here I'm going to give include name is equals to smoke, only execute smoke test cases. Okay, so this is like daily. So another one is like I've defined this one, right? So what I'm going to do is like I'll be defining other groups also. So here weekly. So weekly include sanity. Copy this, and here I'm going to give monthly. So I want to include regression. Okay. So now we have, see, we have groups of groups. Okay. So this is like, it's a whole group, and this is like smoke is like a small group. It's kind of like, a group inside a group. Okay. So group inside a group. All test cases which are coming as part of like smoke group are grouped as like a daily. Here smoke and sanity are grouped as like a weekly again. Okay. Smoke, sanity, and regression is grouped as like a monthly. Okay, if you consider this one is like a kind of like small colony. Okay, so this is kind of like a small area. Let us take like this is I'm just giving an example, guys. So it's kind of like a let us consider this is kind of like a place in Hyderabad. For example, this is like Lingampalli, and this is kind of like a group of it. Okay, so it's kind of like a Hyderabad. So here it's kind of like Lingampalli and Kukatpalli, it comes as like a Hyderabad. So it's kind of like Kukatpalli, KPHP, and Lingampalli, and this is kind of like a Hyderabad. Okay, so it's like we are just grouping them. Okay, grouping them, group of groups, what we call. Okay, now it's kind of like what you want to run. So include, if you want to run only daily, it will run only those sanity cases. Okay, like smoke cases. Let's go and execute it now. See what is happening in this case. It's going to execute smoke. Okay, so now I want to run weekly. Okay, so weekly. What execute? Now it will execute both smoke and sanity. Okay. So it's kind of like now I want to run monthly. Okay. The test cases what is like now again I'm grouping the test cases which are already grouped. Okay. Now you see all of them are excluded. Okay. So here if you want to exclude sanity, okay, smoke. Won't be fine. Okay, it's not allowing here. Only it says like we can include or else we have to delete this. Okay, so it is like not accepting here in this case. I think, yeah, so there's a congestion or there's a constraint here. Sorry for this. Okay, so smoke only we can include this. Okay, so only we can include otherwise we can just remove it. Okay, now you see we have smoke, we have like this is like smoke is a group. That group is defined as like a major group daily. Okay, so it's like parent group, it's a child group. Okay, this is child group and this is like parent group. These are like child groups and this is like parent group, and these are like child groups and these are like parent groups. So whichever you want to include, you can include and you can exclude this. Okay, so I'll take an example of two things here. One is like defining the group, another one is like just so here I'm going to make it as like two. So here I just want to execute only groups. In that case, you can just remove this. This is like group, only group. Okay, only group is like if you want to execute small group. Okay, so we'll execute this test case and see what is the output. So we have defined this test and we have defined this test. Okay, so this test will execute only small group and this test will execute monthly. Okay, so let me go and execute this case now. Here you see test 1, test 2 are related to the small group. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are related to the monthly. Okay, so for example, smoke, weekly I want to run sanity, and monthly I want to run regression. Okay, so now you see, now I've defined this. I'm going to execute this. Now you see the difference, it will only execute 4 test cases. Okay, 2 are from this particular test and 2 are coming from this regression. But my condition is like I want to execute all the groups here. Okay, I want to execute all the meta groups. Meta groups are like group of groups. Okay, I want to execute daily, I want to execute weekly, I want to execute monthly. But here it's like again I have to write like what makes the difference is like again I have to go here and put daily, month, weekly. Okay, so we'll execute this and we see what is the output here. It is executing, but this is not a best practice. Okay, so for this we have one other option which is called, if you want to execute all the meta groups, we can use all. Okay, we can use all time. So just execute this, it will execute all the test cases. Should execute it. Let me just check what is the tab given. Define that run. Include name all. Yes, this should execute now. So let me just execute. What is that? It is showing daily, weekly, monthly, and include all. Right click, run as. It is executing only these things. It should execute all. Let me just check the documentation. So if you want to execute all of them, see, this is what we have used, right? So define, okay. So it is saying like functionality includes define is equals to all. Inside that all, you are specifying. Okay. So I just made one little mistake here. So what they are doing is like now you see daily, weekly, and monthly. Okay. So inside this again, what they are defining is like define. Here I'm going to name it as like include. So if you want to include, I thought like directly we can give it, but here you can see the syntax. It says like, so these two groups, whatever we have defined is like defined as like a function test. Okay, so function test, and there is another group which is like again it is grouped inside group. It's like simply yes here also. So first we have one group, and this group is like grouped into this, and likewise we have another group, and this is like the another meta group. So what they are doing is like we are putting everything inside this major group. Okay, this is group, this is group, and inside that we have like you can see these are the two groups which are defined, and this is like again grouping. Okay, so it's simple kind of like this guys. Let me give an example here in this case. So it's kind of like we have for example cities. Cities are again grouped into the states, and states are again grouped into the countries. Okay, so again countries are grouped into the different countries. Like let us take, we can say continent. Okay, so it's kind of like cities first grouped, after that states, after that countries, after that continents. Okay, so like this they are grouping it. So here what we have to do is like, now you see I'm going to give it as like include name is equals to all. I want to include all of them as like name is equals to all. Okay, so here what do you want to include is like you want to include smoke. So instead of giving like sorry, define daily, daily, we have to give the meta group names. Okay, daily, weekly, and monthly. Okay, now you see this is one group, and this is grouped as like meta group, and meta group is considered as like all. Okay, so let's go and execute it. Now it should execute all the test cases. Okay, so the thing is like what I did is like directly I give all here, so it should not define like, we should not define like this. We have to define this is the thing, but group, and this is again grouped as like meta group, and this meta group is like again grouped as like a published meta group. That's nothing but all. Okay, group of groups. Okay, so this like this is what we have to like do when we want to execute all the test cases. Okay, daily test cases, weekly and monthly, we want to execute all this. Like for example, we have a release build, and this release build we want to execute all the test cases. Okay, so it's like daily, weekly, and monthly. So this works well when we want to like do this is smoke test and sanity test and regression test here. But what if you have like something kind of like if this is the case, weekly we want to execute smoke and sanity, and monthly we want to execute all of them three. Okay, so here instead of putting like daily, weekly, and monthly, so directly I'm putting as like all. So it is like again we have two things. Now we can go and change it as like daily, we can go and change it as like weekly, we can go and change it as like monthly. If for example, if you want to execute all test cases, then directly you can give it as like all. So now there is no, like you can see there is a similar execution which is happening. Okay, so it will consider all of them which are like overlapping. It will just eliminate this. Okay, smoke is executed as part of weekly, so this smoke will be like excluded. So here like smoke and sanity are executed as part of like monthly. These two things will be excluded. In all, what it does is like it will exclude monthly. Whatever test cases which are like kind of overlapping, those will be removed, and those like it will be taken as like a unique test cases, and it will exclude it. Okay, finally we got all test cases that are executed as part of this particular test. Okay, so if you want to define single group, here you can give it as like a groups run include, and you have to do the group name. And if you want to define them as like a groups which are like group of groups, meta groups, then you have to use this define name is equals to daily, and you need to use the tag called include. If you include this smoke, now it will be considered as like a daily. Here you can change it. Okay, define name is equals to like yeah, sorry, here include name is equals to daily, you can run it. Okay, if you want to see, now you see only it will execute the test cases which are smoke test in the test group. Okay, so now if you want to run weekly, so you can define it as like weekly, execute it. Okay, now you see smoke are executed because weekly we have smoke and sanity. If you want to define monthly, you can define monthly. Now you see all smoke, sanity, and regression will be executed because monthly has all three of them. Now it's like I want to execute all of these meta groups. Okay, now you see all of them got executed. Okay. So this is all about like the groups. And one more thing is like now you see guys here, I want to execute this particular test case on Windows. Okay. So I want to put the tag as like Windows Windows dot some 11 I want to execute. This test case is on 11 operating system, and this I want to execute on 10. And yeah, let's look into this two examples first. Okay. So here what I'm going to do is like I want to execute them as like Windows, whatever we have. I want to execute. Okay. So I'll just comment this. Okay. Now I will go and execute this. Only one test is executed, but I want to execute this both two test cases. Okay. So like there could be like 10 point some. Okay, 10 version is there. This one is also 10 version is there. Okay. So but the thing is like okay, let me take one example. So here we'll just defer the operating systems. Okay. So it is like 10. Okay. Anyways, like it is already 10. So here we have like Windows 10 and Windows 11. But after dot, you see that only version is changing. Okay. Version is changing. Okay. But I want to execute them on Windows. For example, there are like few systems which are like, Linux. So which are marked as like Linux. Grouped as like Linux. This test cases should be executed only on Linux machine. Here. Here. Okay, so Linux dot 2 version, Linux dot 3 version. Okay, so but the thing is like there are some test cases which are grouped as like Linux test cases and Windows test cases, but I'm not worried about like any versions. Okay, versions are different, but still the functionality would remain same. In that case, I want to execute all the Windows which are all the test cases which are grouped as like Windows. Okay, so for that, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to use a regular expression, that is nothing but a special character star. Okay, Windows dot star. So earlier we have given Windows dot 10, so it has executed only one test cases. Now if I give Windows dot star, what it does is like it will consider the test cases which are marked as like different versions will be executed. Okay, so this is nothing but special character. We are using dot star. That can be anything. Okay, that can be anything. Windows dot 10, Windows dot 11, Windows dot 20. It doesn't care about it. Okay, so it will just go and execute those test cases. Okay, so this is the special character that we are going to use if you want to execute the test cases. Okay, so this is about like how do we execute with help of like a regular expression. So I'm going to create one other. Okay, I'll just remove this one. Now it's like we have a two test cases. Like one is like in group that I want to execute. So here you can include the other tests also. Like for example, if you want to execute Linux machine dot star, so it will execute Linux. Okay. So let me execute this. Now it should execute sanity also, right? In the first test. Observe carefully in the first test. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4 is like 3, 4 are related to the Linux group. Okay, Linux operating machine. So likewise, you can just categorize your groups, guys. If you whatever like this is like simple group and this is like little complex. This is like group of groups. Okay. So if you want to define like group of groups, you have to define. If you have to use define tag. Okay. So groups define tag and give the name of the group that you want to include as like a meta group. And you can still go and again redefine this particular group as like a meta group of meta group. Okay. Group of meta group. In that case, what we have to do is like we have to define all and include those meta groups inside this group. And now we can go and directly run this all. So what it does is like it will include all of these groups, okay, meta groups. Again, it will go and call this group. So it's not too much smoke. It will execute the smoke. Finally, what it does like it will go and execute the smoke. All will call this group, and this group will go and execute the first group. That's the different daily meta group. Daily meta group will have this smoke group. So smoke group will be executed. Okay. So likewise, we can categorize. Now it is that we have looked into the test level. Okay, we have looked at like test level. How do we execute this groups as part of like a suite level? Now what I'm going to do is like I'll create another XML file. So here I'm going to put it as like testng XML / suite groups. Okay, suite groups. Inside that, I'm just going to add this. Now you see what I'm going to do is like I want to execute the groups, right? Groups. So inside that, we have to define run tag. Run tag will have like include what is the name equals to sanity. Okay, so now it is that I don't want to define anything as part of like test. I have like multiple tests now. Okay, so test 1, test 2, and test 3. I want to execute all sanity test of this particular test. Okay, all the like sanity group, the test cases which are marked as like a sanity group at the suite level. Okay, we are not defining anything under the test. Okay, let's go and execute this one. So what happens? You see, what is it is doing now? Okay, 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, because we have defined the sanity, right? So what it does is like it will go here and it will check sanity wherever sanity group is defined with the R condition. Okay, sanity, 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 and sanity. All these 4 test cases are executed. Okay, now I want to execute like here I have defined groups as like sanity, but in test I am defining it as like smoke. Okay, here I want to execute the smoke, and here in this particular test I want to execute regression. Okay, so this should execute smoke, this should execute regression, and this should execute sanity. Okay, so because suite level we are defining the sanity, if it is like overriding the test case, let's go and execute this one and see what is the output. See what it is doing now? 1 2 3 4. Okay, but here we have defined the smoke test. So which one is taking the priority? So let me just check this one. So it should execute only these 2, right? So which one is taking the priority now? This which one is taking the priority? The priority is like at the suite level. Okay, 1 2 3 4, and you can see there is another catch here. Okay, so now you can see regression. What is the regression that we have specified here? So it is also including the regression suite also. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, at the last like 1 2 3 4, all the sanity are executed. Okay, so but here what is happening, like it is not overriding, but it is like still including those groups also. Including groups, include the groups which are defined at suite along with the groups which are defined at the test level. Okay, whichever way we want we can use it, but the still is like we can, like sometimes what happens is like if you define something here, for example, you see, if you give the same group name, let's go and execute this. So what is happening here? 1 2 3 4. Okay, but here you see what we have defined is like sanity. If you define the smoke, what it is doing, like smoke plus the sanity test case are executed. If you are defining sanity here and sanity here, so it's kind of like overriding these things. Okay, overriding in the sense just like including, and it is like eliminating the eliminating the overlapping test cases. Overlapping is the same test cases that we have here, right? So go back to this test case and you can see sanity, 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 sanity. Okay, all 4 are executed as part of like R4 are defined as part of like suite. So the same things are executed again. There is no point of including this. Okay, so if you want to have this sanity executed on your top of the test cases, so you can remove this if in case like if you don't want to include that. Otherwise, if you specify this as like smoke, what it does, like it will consider smoke plus sanity test case. Here regression plus sanity. Here it's like only the sanity will be executed. Okay, so this is at the suite level that we have, that we want to execute the test cases. We can define them as like suite level. Are you clear with this, guys?
Yes.
Okay. So this looks little tedious because I'll just try to put these points here, what we have discussed so far. Okay. What is grouping test and how do we define groups? And we have discussed about like types of groups, nothing but group, meta group, the group inside group. Okay. So meta group, then we have excluded groups. Okay. If you want to exclude the group, then you can just give that inside that group run exclude name is equals to the group name. Okay. So then execute group set test level and suite level. And then we are going to execute groups using regular expression. Okay, I'll explain it again. Yes, grouping is like if you want to execute a certain set of test cases within the same class. Okay, so you want to group them: smoke test, sanity, or regression test. Smoke test will not have more test cases because just we want to see that build is working properly or not. Okay, let us take we have 100 test cases. In 100 test cases, I'm going to mark 20 test cases are like smoke test. Okay, and 40 tests are like sanity test. And all 100 test cases are like regression test. Okay. So in this case, what I want to do is like I want to group it. Okay. So in this group, I want to group this one as like smoke, and this one as like sanity, and this one is like regression. So how do we define the groups here? So we'll be defining the groups. How do we define? Yes, we have to use groups tag groups. Inside that we have to use run. Inside that we have to use include or include name or exclude. Okay, so this is how we'll be grouping them. Now it is like meta groups is like if you want to define the meta groups, then you have to define it's like meta groups is equals to groups inside that we have to give the define. So inside that you can include the group names. Include names. So here I'm going to give the group names. Okay, so this is how we define it. So this is like single group that we are going to define, and you can close it. So I'm just using this one as like run. So here it is like similar thing, but what we have to do is like we have to close the define, then after we have to close the groups, then after we have to use run. Inside that run, so how do we define this? So you can go and check this one. Groups test cases. Okay, so we are defining the groups, and how do we run is like again we can go and run it in this. Okay, run and include that. Okay, so here we need to add this run inside this. Okay, so this is how we'll be executing. Like this is like simple groups that we are going to execute, and this is like we are going to execute group of groups. Okay, so this is like we discussed about groups, meta groups, and excluding groups. Now, suite level and test level is like if you want to include them at the test level, we have to define test. Inside that, we'll have all these things. Okay, so whatever we have, all these things is like copy and paste it here. So inside this, we are going to have the test. So here I'm going to close the test. So suite level is like simple that again go here and you can add everything under the suite level. But only thing is like we will be going here, adding suite. So slash suite. Okay. So I'll explain it here also. Now you can see this is like suite and test. We want to execute only one group. Okay. For example, if you want to execute only one group, here we specify the group name. Exclude, we can exclude it. Okay. Just use the exclude here. So groups run, include, exclude. Okay. So within this class, this is like first test. Here it is like groups of groups. Okay. So this is a group. I want to define it as like a meta group. So in that case, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to use the define name and I'm going to use daily. Okay, I want to use daily. So this is like daily smoke, and here it's like weekly smoke and sanity should be considered. Here it is like monthly smoke, sanity, and regression should be considered. And how do I run this meta groups? Here we have to use this run, include, and the group name. If you want to group the meta groups itself, then directly we can use define name, all include this meta groups inside this. Okay. So after this, if you want to run it, you can just run it using the include name is equals to all. Okay. So this is at the test level. How do we define the suite level? Suite level is like we can define the suite level here. Groups run include. So when do we can use this is like, for example, if we have 10 test cases or else 10 classes. Okay. Let us take like 10 classes. 10 classes. In these 10 classes, 5 are smoke and 7 are sanity and 10 are regression. In that case, if you want to run something like, including them, okay, sanity is like what it does is like it will include 10 test cases in the respect, like, 10 classes will have different test cases with the sanity rate. So those will be excluded. If you want to execute only 5, then you can mark it as like smoke and remove this one. Okay, so this is not required. So you can just remove this one. Explicitly, if you want to run smoke here as part of suite, and if you want to run some classes, if you want to run regression. In that case, what we do is like we can go and use this particular regression. So this much complex we don't do. So generally what we do is like we are going to categorize them as part of like a smoke test. So that's nothing but simple XML files. Okay. So this is how we do. We don't categorize them in like, if you want to execute them like this, we can do it still. But it's like we don't categorize them like this. Most of the times we have on-demand execution. Okay. On-demand is like, so they let us know that this execution should be done at certain point of time. Okay. So on particular day. So we can go and execute them. But there are a lot of feasibilities that as part of our curriculum and discussing about these things, how much complex that we can, how much deep complex that we can take is like still we have a lot of things that we can discuss, but I don't want to confuse you guys now. So there we can execute in package wise also, in suites also we can execute. Okay. So this is all about like groups, guys. So tomorrow we'll discuss about like how do we execute, how do we use this depends on methods and depends on groups tomorrow. So another thing is like I just want to show you one thing is like how do we exactly execute suites of suites. Okay. So how do we define this multiple suites, for example? So I want to execute this where we have group test and XML. Okay. So these two XMLs I want to execute. Okay. So in this case, what I can do is like I can just go and mark them as like a suite files. Okay. So how do we create is like right click, go to this others XML file, suites of suites. Okay. Suites of suites in the sense. So this will execute the it's kind of like two XMLs that I want to club and make it as like a one suite. Okay. So in that case, we can just go and use this stng XML / suite of suites. Okay. So it has created the suite. Let me put it back here. New suite file. Okay, let me just rename this one. It's not required. I'll name it as like a master suite. Okay. I'll name it as like master suite XML. So in this, what we do is like we are going to use suite name is equals to master suite. So in that we have to give the suite file. So here we have suite XML. Okay, sorry, suite files. We'll have to give. Remove this and this one. Now we have to specify file path equals to. Okay, what is the path of that file here? So for example, if you want to execute this, do test, right? Go to the properties. So here I'm going to give it as like path. Should be dot. So another one is like this is suite name, right? So I'll take this one. Was not found. It is saying this XML is not found. Let me put this one. So it is asking for the path, right? So we can put this. So base path it should take. Now you see, it has executed suites of suites. Okay, so it's like suite one. In this we have like test ng groups, ng groups, ng group, test ng groups, test ng groups. So all of them are like test ng group, but suites you can see. This is like one suite and this is like another suite. Okay, so you can see one suite executed, and after that the other suite also executed. Okay, so we have different names of that so that it's like showing up this one. So let me take something, just kind of like this one. We can take this XML so that we can see some different output. Yes, now I'll go and execute this one. Right click, run as. The other one is executing TestNG with test classes, right? So it has a different set of execution. So it is executing this. Okay, now you see this is like suite one, which is coming from this particular suite, and this is like different suite. Okay, so suites are suites that we can execute. Okay, but the thing is like we have to define like this. Suite files, file path we have to define. Okay, so we looked into groups methods also, right? How do we define the methods inside this class? We have to define the methods. Okay, because class will have the method. Test does not have any methods. Okay, test will have classes. But in case of groups that we like see, groups are like, grouped as part of like a classes. Within that, we want to exclude the methods. And if you want to include these methods also, this is also fine. For example, go here, go to this group test. Now in this group that you want to include only, so here we have defined Windows, right? So in this, go to this particular, I want to exclude this group, test one. Okay. So what I can do, here I can go and I can give methods. Exclude, name is equals to, this is the method that I want to exclude. Element type. Okay, just we have to remove this one side. Classes within that exclude. End tag of the element class must be end. We did not define the tag class ending. Okay, so that is the reason why it's showing here. Now you see. So what should be excluded as part of this group? See, Windows should be excluded, Linux should be excluded, but test one should be skipped. Okay, test one should be skipped. So when I exclude this, so let me exclude the only look at the first one. Okay, so don't worry about the second test execution. I see smoke test is executed only once. Okay, so test one is not considered here because we are excluding it. Okay, method excluding it. So if you want to exclude second one, you can exclude the second one also. Test one will be excluded, two will be skipped. So one excluded, two will be skipped. So now it is like, see, we have defined the groups. Inside the group, again, we have defined the methods, excluding the methods. Whichever way you want, you can exclude. Okay. So this is like configuration. We can just configure our test cases in which way we want to exclude. So with this, we have completed how do we create the groups and how do we execute the groups. Okay. So we have discussed so many things today, and please watch this video again and try to understand. Okay. So how do we define the groups as test level, suite level? How do we run it? What are the different types of groups? Okay. How do we include the groups, exclude groups at both the levels, and exclude groups, exclude groups using the regular expressions. Okay. So thanks guys. Thanks for your time. Please let me know if you have any doubts. You can stay back and you can answer doubts.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you, sir.
So,